Hebrews 11 says this about the greatest heroes of faith who have ever lived: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the ones the Bible holds up as proof that God keeps his word. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and exiles on the earth. God looked at Archangel Michael today and issued a specific directive. Go and find the chosen one who has always felt like a foreigner. Find the one who has never fully fit. Find them and tell them that feeling was never a defect. It was the signature of the ones I called my own. If those words just landed somewhere specific in you, if foreigner and exile just named something you've been carrying for years without knowing what to call it, subscribe to this channel and drop your city in the comments. We want to see where the chosen ones are scattered across this earth. More prophetic decrees are coming, and the next one may carry the exact word your season is waiting for. You know this feeling from the inside, and it is different from what other people think it is. It is not loneliness in the ordinary sense. It is not the absence of people or the absence of conversation. You can be surrounded, fully engaged, smiling, contributing, and still have something in you that is somewhere else entirely. A structural disconnection that no amount of effort to close has ever fully resolved. You've been in rooms full of people who love you and still felt like you were perceiving a slightly different version of reality than everyone around you, and no one has ever quite been able to explain why. You have spent years trying to close that gap. You've adapted your language, adjusted your presentation, selected which parts of yourself were safe to bring into which rooms. You've gone quieter when you felt too much. You've simplified what you were thinking to match what the room could hold. You've watched yourself do it in real time. The compression happening, the calibration, the selection of what could be present without disrupting the frequency of the space. And after years of that work, a specific kind of exhaustion sets in. Not the exhaustion of rejection, the exhaustion of someone who has been working very hard to become smaller than they are. But God did not send Archangel Michael today to help you compress more effectively. He sent Michael to change the entire frame with a word you were designed to receive at this exact moment. The reason you have never fully fit into the world around you is not that something went wrong in your formation. It is that God built you for a world that the people around you cannot yet see. The disconnection you have felt your entire life was not a malfunction. It was the accurate spiritual perception of someone carrying a calling that exceeds the capacity of the current order to contain. And you have been spending years trying to fit what was designed for eternity into the dimensions of the present. The world looked at your difference and produced a diagnosis. It had words for what it observed. Too sensitive, too intense, too much, not enough, difficult to read, hard to place. It assigned your inability to assimilate as a social deficit to be managed or a personality trait to be explained. But heaven looked at the same thing and called it something entirely different: evidence of origin. The person who cannot fully settle into the world around them is not experiencing a social failure. They are experiencing the accurate spiritual perception of their own condition. They were built for something else. And that perception is not a wound to be healed. It is a compass pointing in the direction no one around them has mapped yet. Because what you carry inside you is not designed for ordinary exposure, and the isolation that surrounded your formation was the active protection of something too significant to be diluted by premature contact with environments not calibrated for it. A world that doesn't exist yet. A sound that hasn't been released yet, a capacity that hasn't found its full context yet, an architecture of perception built for a reality still being assembled. That is what you have been holding. And every room that felt closed to you, every circle that didn't open, every space that didn't fully receive what you brought, those were not rejections. They were God saying, not yet, not here. This environment is not built for what I placed in you. Wait. If this word is landing in you right now, if something in your spirit is saying yes to what you're hearing, write in the comments, God sees me. You have been perceived as different your whole life. God sees exactly what he built, and what he built is exactly what he intended. The Apostle Paul wrote something in 1 Corinthians 1:27 through 28 that the chosen one who has felt out of place their entire life needs to read carefully. God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are. This is not a consolation for people who missed the cut. It is a description of God's deliberate selection methodology. He specifically recruits from the category the existing world has already dismissed, because what the world has already decided doesn't fit is precisely the material he uses to build what the existing world cannot produce. Why would God operate that way? Because what the existing order builds, it builds in its own image. The system produces what confirms the system. God is not trying to improve the current world by its own methods. He is building something the current world cannot generate from within itself, and for that he needs material the world has not been able to shape to its own purposes. The Greek word Paul uses for foolish is mora, something that appears without practical value by current standards. The word for despised is exothenemena, scorned, considered nothing. These are not descriptions of failure. They are the criteria of the candidate God selects for work that requires a vessel the current world's pressures were never able to mold. The night before his crucifixion, Jesus prayed over the chosen ones who would follow him. And what he prayed is recorded in John 17, verse 14 through 16. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, for they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. I do not ask you to take them out of the world, but to protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Jesus did not pray for the removal of the tension. He prayed for protection within it, because the tension between the chosen one and the world they were placed in was never a problem to resolve. It was the operational condition of the assignment. Not of the world does not mean withdrawn from the world. It means functioning in the world from a different source, carrying a different citizenship, oriented toward a different outcome, building toward a reality the world around them cannot yet see. The chosen one in the world, but not of it, is not someone who cannot engage. They are someone who engages fully, while remaining fundamentally pointed towards something beyond the current age, and that persistent orientation, that internal pointer that has never stopped pointing somewhere else, is exactly what makes them useful to God in the world. It is also exactly what makes every room feel like a temporary residency. What does that look like in the daily experience? It looks like sitting in a room where everyone agrees on the direction forward, while something in you quietly registers that this path leads somewhere no one in the room has mapped. It looks like engaging fully in a conversation and simultaneously perceiving the thing behind the thing that no one else is naming. It looks like participating in the world while carrying the sense that the world's description of itself is incomplete, that the story everyone is telling about what is real is missing a chapter. You have always been present. You have never been fully arrived. And the part of you that was always slightly somewhere else was not distraction. It was perception. If this is speaking to what you've been carrying, if the phrase, not of the world, is naming what you felt your entire life but couldn't explain, let me know by liking this video. It helps this word reach the chosen ones who need to hear it at exactly this moment. Imagine what it felt like to be Noah, a man living inside a civilization that had a settled, shared understanding of how reality worked, complete systems, established relationships, a collective sense of what was normal and what was not. While Noah was constructing a structure for a world that did not yet exist, there was no frame of reference for what he was doing, no precedent, no prior example that validated the project. No one around him could see, feel, or confirm the reality he was building toward, and yet he carried the blueprint inside his obedience and kept building, day after day. While the world around him had decided with certainty that he had lost his orientation with what was real. Genesis 6:9 describes Noah with precise language. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. Among the people of his time. The text does not say Noah was accepted by the people of his time. It does not say he fit comfortably in his generation's understanding of things. It says he was blameless in his integrity, while surrounded by a civilization that had no framework for his project. The gap between what he was building and what anyone around him recognized as useful or sane was not evidence that he had missed something. It was the exact measurement of how far ahead of his moment his assignment was positioned. The incomprehension of his generation was the proof of the advanced nature of his calling. The ark was not primarily a boat. A boat navigates existing water. The ark was a carrying vessel for the continuity of what was sacred, designed to preserve what was irreplaceable through a transition no one else had prepared for. Noah's assignment was not to improve the existing world. It was to carry forward what the existing world's own structures could not protect. And the chosen one who has felt that they were built for something they cannot fully explain to the people around them, that they are carrying a blueprint no current system can validate, is carrying something structurally similar. Not a vessel for existing conditions, a vessel for what is coming, built in the middle of a world that cannot comprehend the project. Daniel was carried to Babylon as a captive. Babylon was the most sophisticated civilization of his era, engineered to impress, to overwhelm, to absorb everything foreign into its own cultural pattern. The Babylonian system was deliberately designed to reshape captured talent into Babylonian tools. Daniel's response is recorded in Daniel 1:8. Daniel resolved in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's food or the wine he drank. He was in Babylon. He refused to be absorbed by Babylon. Not with confrontation, not with visible rebellion, with a quiet, settled internal resolve that kept the architecture of what God placed in him intact, even inside the most sophisticated cultural assimilation pressure in the ancient world. By the end of Daniel chapter 1, the result of his refusal to assimilate is declared. God gave Daniel knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. The wisdom Daniel carried into Babylon, the one he had protected from absorption, turned out to be exactly what the Babylonian system needed and exactly what the Babylonian system could not produce by its own methods. His competitive advantage in Babylon was the thing he had refused to surrender to Babylon. The chosen one who has resisted the pressure to fully assimilate into the world around them has not been limiting their impact. They have been protecting the source of it. What does that look like practically? It looks like full engagement without full surrender. Daniel served the king of Babylon with wisdom, accuracy, and excellence, while carrying inside him something the palace did not produce and could not duplicate. He was present in the world completely. He was not of it in the way that mattered. And the thing he protected through that distinction, the capacity to perceive what the existing systems could not generate, was the precise thing that made him irreplaceable to the very systems that had captured him. The protection of your origin is not the obstacle to your influence. It is the precondition of it. Jesus came to his own people, and his own did not receive him. John 1:11. the Word through whom all of creation was made, the one who designed the entire order of things, arrived in the world he had built, and the world did not recognize him. Not because he was wrong, because he was carrying something the world had no category for. The rejection of the chosen one by the systems and circles they move through is not evidence that they missed their calling. It is evidence that their calling exceeds the current capacity of those systems to contain it, and the one who built you experienced the same thing first, came to his own, was not received, and changed everything anyway. I left something in the first pinned comment for the chosen one who feels something stirring right now, a recognition in their spirit that this word is naming what their whole life has been pointing toward. It is for the one who is ready to stop trying to fit in and begin walking in what they were actually built for. Here is what you have been carrying that the people around you cannot see, a prototype of the world that is coming, not a fantasy, not an overactive imagination, a genuine spiritual architecture, a way of seeing, connecting, building, and perceiving that is calibrated for a reality the current age has not yet produced. When you sit in a room and feel the gap between how you perceive things and how everyone else in the room perceives them, that gap is not social awkwardness. That gap is the exact measurement of how far forward your calling extends beyond the current moment. You were not built for here. You were built to carry something here that belongs to what comes after here. Have you ever wondered why the sense of being out of step never fully resolved? Why no matter what you changed about yourself, the fundamental mismatch remained? Isaiah 55:8 and 9 gives the answer directly. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. The gap between what God is building in the chosen one and what the world around them can comprehend is not accidental. It is proportional. The higher the calling, the wider the gap between the carrier and the current comprehension of those around them. The chosen one who has felt most out of place has been most specifically aligned with what heaven is preparing. 1 Peter 2:11 gives the chosen one the precise identity that explains the experience. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Peter did not write that to people who had failed to integrate properly. He wrote it as the accurate theological description of what the chosen one actually is. The Greek word is paroikous, those who reside temporarily in a location that is not their permanent home, who do not carry the full rights of citizens because their citizenship belongs somewhere else. That is not a problem to be resolved through better social skills. That is the correct identity of someone whose permanent belonging is anchored in the world that is still coming. Paul said it from a different angle in Philippians 3:20, but with the same precision. Our citizenship is in heaven, not our origin only, our citizenship. The documentation of belonging, the identity papers, the rights, the deep sense of being home, those belong to a place most of the people around the chosen one cannot yet see. The chosen one who has been trying to take up permanent residence in a world where they only hold transit papers will always feel the underlying tension, not as failure, as the accurate perception of their actual condition. Their belonging is not missing, it is anchored somewhere the current world cannot reach. The most costly mistake the chosen one can make, and most of them have made it, is to try to resolve the disconnection through assimilation, through deliberate compression, through the careful curation of which parts of themselves are acceptable in which rooms. This is not humility. Humility before God produces expansion and depth, not compression and reduction. What the assimilation strategy actually does is reduce the chosen one to a size the current world can accommodate, and in doing so, it eliminates the very thing that made them irreplaceable. Every act of successful assimilation into a space God did not design for them traded the full expression of the calling for the temporary comfort of belonging somewhere, and that trade was never what it appeared to be. And the cost of that trade doesn't announce itself immediately. It accumulates across years, as the distance between who you actually are and who you've learned to present grows wider and wider in silence. A depth that went unspoken because the room couldn't hold it. A perception that was edited before it could be shared. A vision that was reduced to a suggestion so it wouldn't disrupt the frequency of the space. A calling that was compressed into something manageable, something explainable, something that fit. The full version of what God placed in you was traded, piece by piece, for the experience of landing somewhere. And the landing always cost something essential. Romans 12:2 names the mechanism directly. Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The Greek word for conformed is syschematizo, to be pressed into a mold, to take on the shape of a form that originates outside you. The chosen one, who has felt relentless pressure to be different from what they are, has been experiencing a syschematizo assault, not random social friction, an active structural force pressing the shape of their calling into the dimensions that the current world can use. And every time they yielded to that pressure, a piece of what God placed in them was bent to fit a container it was never designed for. The mold was not the problem. The surrender to it was. Hold on, because there is something I need to say about the season of isolation before we go further. Something that will change how you read every moment you spent alone, every room that felt closed, every circle that never opened for you. Do not move past this before you receive it. Every room that felt closed to you was not the world failing to recognize your value. It was God protecting the specific thing you were carrying from the diluting influence of environments not calibrated to receive it without neutralizing it. The friendships that didn't go deep were not rejection. They were selective exposure. The circles that never fully opened were not operating at a frequency incompatible with your personality. They were operating at a frequency incompatible with what you were carrying. And God, who was watching over the formation of what He placed in you, kept those environments from absorbing something they were not built to receive. The world assumes isolation is always loss, that the person outside the circle is the one who missed something, but the reverse is equally true. The seed buried in the ground is not missing the sun. It is becoming what the sun cannot yet reach. The isolation of the chosen one is often the period during which what they carry is concentrated, sealed, and protected from the diluting effects of premature contact with systems not yet calibrated to receive it without reshaping it. What the world called absence was often God's most active protection of something He could not afford to have contaminated by ordinary exposure. The closed rooms were not punishment. They were preservation. Consider what the formation season of isolation actually cultivates when it is inhabited rather than merely endured. A person who has had to develop their inner life because their outer life offered limited accommodation develops a quality of attention, a stillness, a precision of perception that people who moved easily through belonging to belonging rarely acquire. The depth of the chosen one who was never quite fully accommodated in the rooms they passed through is the depth of a well that had to go further down to find water that other wells never needed to reach. The isolation did not steal from you. It sent you deeper than ordinary formation could. And what you found down there is what the world that is coming needs. Jesus said in Matthew 5:14, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." Consider the image. A city elevated above its surroundings is not invisible because it doesn't blend in with the landscape. It is visible precisely because it doesn't blend in. The elevation is the source of the visibility. The attempt to lower below the horizon, to shrink down to the level of the terrain around it so as not to stand out, is not humility. It is the concealment of the landmark. The chosen one, who has spent years trying to lower themselves to the height of the world around them, has been erasing the very elevation that was supposed to help people navigate by it. A landmark is not designed to fit into the landscape. It is designed to be findable from a distance. The chosen one, who accepts the full stature of how God built them, without apology, without compression, without the ongoing performance of a smaller version of themselves, becomes findable to people who are looking for something they cannot name yet. People who know they need something beyond what the current landscape offers, who are searching for evidence that the world they sense exists actually does. When the chosen one stops trying to blend in and stands in the full architecture of what God built, they become the proof those people have been looking for. Here is the distinction God is drawing today. The world does not need you to fit into it. The world needs you to carry what you were given for it. Those are not the same assignment. Fitting in is about adapting yourself to what already exists. Carrying is about delivering what hasn't arrived yet. The chosen one, who has spent years trying to fit into a world that cannot hold them, has been solving the wrong problem. Not from disobedience, but from a genuine human desire to belong that God fully understands, respects, and now calls you beyond. The belonging that was designed for you is ahead, not behind. And the key to walking toward it is to stop trying to manufacture belonging in a world that was never its location. The enemy's primary attack against the chosen one who carries this kind of identity is not opposition. It is comparison. He takes the distance, the gap between the chosen one and the world that cannot hold them, and holds it up against the lives of people who move through the world with ease, people whose belonging looks natural, whose circles are warm, whose sense of being in the right place appears effortless. And he whispers, "Why them and not you? Why do they get to belong? What is wrong with you that you have never fully landed anywhere?" That question is not honest inquiry. It is a deliberate weapon, and it is the most persistent one he has deployed against you. Do not close this message before you hear what I am about to say. The comparison the enemy is using needs to be completely dismantled today. Not partially, not redirected, dismantled. Because as long as it stands, it will continue to produce the internal pressure to become something God never designed you to be. The people whose belonging in this world looks effortless are not more favored by God. They are differently assigned. Some callings are specifically designed to serve the world that currently exists, to operate comfortably within its structures, because their purpose is to improve what is already there. Others are designed to carry something that exceeds the current structure entirely, something the existing world cannot validate because it hasn't arrived yet. Both are real, both are necessary, but they are not interchangeable. The enemy's comparison is dishonest, precisely because it holds the experience of one assignment against the experience of a fundamentally different one and calls the difference a deficit. The deficit was never yours. It was the enemy's framing. There is a specific loneliness that belongs to the forerunner, and it is different from ordinary loneliness. It is not the loneliness of someone who hasn't found their people. It is the loneliness of someone who sees the road before it exists, who speaks about a world that others cannot yet perceive, who builds for a moment that hasn't come. That person will always be slightly ahead of the conversation in every room they enter. Not because they are disconnected, not because they are not listening, but because what they are carrying has already taken them somewhere the room has not yet arrived. That gap is not a wound. It is the exact measurement of their advance assignment. And the forerunner, who finally understands this, stops trying to slow down to the room's pace. This is why Hebrews 11:13 through 16 describes the heroes of faith the way it does. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised, they only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and exiles on the earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own, a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. The not fitting was the hallmark of the company God identified with so strongly that he attached his own name to them publicly. Consider what it means, that God says he is not ashamed to be called their God. He's not embarrassed by the gap between what they were carrying and what the world around them could comprehend. He did not look at the foreigner quality of their lives, the unfulfilled promises, the belonging not yet arrived, the world they were building toward that no one else could see, and wish they had fit in better. He looked at all of that and said, I am publicly identified with these people. I carry their name, they carry mine. That is the company the chosen one keeps. That is the company you have been in your entire life, whether or not anyone told you. What is the world God built you for? It is the world where what you carry is the language everyone speaks, where the perception that made you feel strange here is the currency of normal conversation there, where the depth that felt disproportionate in every room you entered is exactly the depth the culture was built to accommodate, where the capacity you developed in the formation years is the foundational contribution of a reality still being assembled. You are not from the future, but you are carrying something for it, and every piece of you that felt out of place here is exactly in place there. The mismatch was never the problem. The mismatch was the map. 2 Corinthians 6:17 gives the instruction, Come out from them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing, and I will receive you. The call to separation is not a call to permanent social withdrawal. It is the protection directive for the formation season, the instruction to keep the integrity of what is being built in you free from the compressing influence of environments that would shape it to their own purposes. The chosen one who has felt the pull towards separation, who has sensed that certain environments were genuinely incompatible with what was growing in them, was not being antisocial. They were responding, often without fully knowing it, to an instruction from God about the protection of what he placed inside them. There are 3 specific releases God is directing the chosen one to make in this new season. The first is the explanation of yourself. Stop trying to explain why you are the way you are to people who were not designed to understand it yet. The explanation will not produce understanding. It will produce exhaustion. The fruit of your assignment will produce understanding when the time for that arrives. What you carry will explain itself when it emerges in its proper environment. The energy you have been spending trying to make your difference legible to spaces that were not built to receive it belongs to the assignment itself. Redirect it. Stop spending the calling trying to justify the calling. The second release is the grief over the belonging you were not given, the circles that never opened, the rooms that never fully received you, the version of ordinary belonging you watched others carry with an ease you could never match. Grieve them, then release them. Not because the loneliness wasn't real, not because it didn't cost something significant, but because holding grief over spaces you were never designed to occupy is the ongoing work of mourning a container that would have contained you, and you were not built to be contained. The belonging that was designed for you is ahead of you, not behind you. Carrying the grief of the wrong containers is the weight that slows down the walk toward the right ones. The third release is the apology. The chosen one who has spent years apologizing, in words or in behavior, or in the ongoing performance of a smaller version of themselves, has been apologizing for the assignment. The depth that people found too much was depth cultivated by God for a specific purpose. The intensity that made spaces uncomfortable was the pressure required to sustain something extraordinary. The perception that felt disproportionate in every room was the perception of someone built to see further than the current landscape allows. No more apologies. Not for the architecture God built in you, not for how he designed the vessel he chose to carry what he placed in you. The apology ends today. After you receive this word, the enemy will not announce his response. He will use the very next interaction that carries discomfort. The next moment, someone looks at you like you're strange, or speaks in the tone that communicates you need to be managed, to whisper, "You see, this message was wrong. You still don't fit. You never will." Watch for that response, because it is coming, and when it comes, recognize it for what it is, not evidence against what was declared today, but confirmation of it. The pressure to conform intensifies precisely when the chosen one is closest to accepting their actual identity. The intensity of the pressure is the proof of the value of what is being protected. Within the next 21 days, God is going to allow you to encounter someone who carries the same origin signal, someone who perceives the world the way you do, who has felt the same structural disconnection in every room they've entered, who has asked the same questions about why they could never quite land. That encounter will not feel like meeting someone new. It will feel like recognition, like two people from the same country who found each other in a foreign land. It is God showing the chosen one that they are not alone in their difference, that the world he is building has more citizens than they know, and that the forerunner has never been running alone, even when the road felt entirely empty. Within 40 days, something in the direction of your specific assignment will begin to clarify, not as a dramatic vision, not as a sudden, complete revelation, as a quiet, deepening certainty about a specific direction, a sense of, this is what the capacity was built for. This is the environment calibrated for what I've been carrying. This is where the foreigner quality becomes native. When that clarity arrives, receive it without requiring it to make sense to everyone around you first. It is for you. It does not need external validation before you act on it. It is the beginning of the navigation toward the world you were built for, and the first steps of that navigation belong to obedience, not to comprehension. The world God built you for does not only concern your generation. The chosen one, who accepts the full identity of the foreigner carrying something from the future, is not just navigating their own life. They are opening a door. The generations that come after them will walk into a world that is different, not because of circumstance alone, but because someone was willing to carry the prototype without abandoning it for the temporary comfort of belonging somewhere it didn't fit. Every time the chosen one resisted the compression, they were building an inheritance. Every act of protection of what God placed in them over the pressure to surrender it was the opening of ground that the people who follow them will walk on. God does not look at the chosen one's inability to fit the current world and see a problem that needs correction. He looks at it and sees exactly what he intended. Every aspect of the design that made the chosen one feel out of place here, the depth, the sensitivity, the perception that registered what others missed, the longing for something they couldn't name, the capacity that felt disproportionate in every room they entered. He built those in, not randomly, not as errors he hasn't gotten to yet, as the specific features of a carrier designed to hold something the current world's containers cannot accommodate. The very things the world called liabilities were the architecture of the assignment. And God says this to you today: I know what I built. I know what I placed in you before the world had a word for it. I know the rooms that didn't receive you, the circles that didn't open, the years you spent trying to calibrate yourself to a frequency you were never designed to carry. I saw all of it, and none of it was wasted. The isolation was my protection of what was in you. The disconnection was my preservation of something too large to be diluted by ordinary exposure. The difference that made you feel alien in every room was the fingerprint of your origin. You are mine, and you were never designed for this world the way it is. You were designed for what I am building with it. That is not a future consolation. That is your present identity. Before the prayer, receive the final word of this decree. God is not asking you to be comfortable with the distance any longer. He is not asking you to perform belonging for the sake of those who cannot comprehend the assignment. He is releasing you today through what Archangel Michael was sent to deliver, to stand in the full architecture of how you were built, without apology, without compression, without the ongoing work of making yourself smaller than he designed. The one who never fully fit, who always felt like a foreigner, that is exactly who he sent Michael to find today. He found you. Now stand in what you are. Father God, I come before you in the name of Jesus Christ. I stand here as a chosen one who has spent years carrying something I couldn't fully name, feeling the gap between who I am and how the world around me moves, not knowing whether that gap was defect or design. And I receive today the answer you sent Archangel Michael to deliver. It was design. You built me for a world the people around me cannot yet see. The disconnection I have felt my entire life was not a malfunction. It was the accurate spiritual perception of someone carrying a calling that exceeds the capacity of the current order to contain. I receive that, not as a consolation, but as the truth of my identity. Fully, without reservation. I release the grief over every circle that didn't fully receive me, every room where I sat and smiled, while something in me was somewhere else entirely, every version of myself I compressed to fit into spaces God never designed for me. I release those losses now, not as though they didn't cost something real, but as a person who now understands what they were protecting. And I release the apology, the ongoing, unspoken apology for being too much, too deep, too intense, too far ahead of the room. You built me this way, on purpose, for a purpose. I received the identity of the foreigner and exile, in the company of Noah and Daniel and the heroes of Hebrews 11 who were also strangers on this earth. That is my company. That is my inheritance. I break agreement with every lie the enemy planted in the gap. The lie that the distance was rejection, that the difference was defect, that the isolation meant I had missed something everyone else figured out. Those agreements are broken now in the name of Jesus Christ. I break the pattern of compression, the reflexive habit of shrinking myself to the dimensions of spaces that were not built to hold me. I break agreement with the comparison, the whisper that said others got to belong and I didn't, and that the difference was my failure. It was not my failure. It was my assignment. I will not compress the assignment anymore. I will not apologize for the architecture. I will carry what I was given to carry without explanation and without apology. Archangel Michael, take this back before the throne of God as a sealed covenant agreement. Let it be written that on this day the chosen one received the decree of their identity as a foreigner and exile, not as a wound to be mourned, but as the hallmark of the ones God was not ashamed to be called their God. Let the 21-day window bring the encounter of recognition, another forerunner who carries the same signal, so the chosen one knows they have never been as alone in this as the enemy told them. Let the 40-day window bring the clarifying direction, the sense of where the assignment goes from here, the first navigation toward the world that was designed for what they carry. Let the compression end. Let the apology end. Let what God built stand in its full stature in the holy, powerful, matchless name of Jesus Christ. Amen. If you received this word today, let me know by writing in the comments, I received this truth. I've placed another video on your screen right now, your next step on this path. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.